Brian and I were talking about AI YouTube thumbnails all kind of have this look. They're all kind of like, this brown and yellow and like a lot of detail, and just look at that, It's like the same shit over and over and over, right?
Yeah.
So Brian slides like on our company meeting, and then Brian slides at his training. So when he did his training for, you just shot somebody, now what? And then his slide was, you just shot somebody, and then it like cuts off, and it's like that time reverse. Wait, let's go back. And I'm like, these are fucking amazing slides. Can you please redo our thumbnails to a more, and then I'm like, even if we have to go back and put the text into Canva, like a text overlay into Canva, we can do that. No big deal.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that, Josh?
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, I think especially just testing it out too and seeing what gets better results, because we have enough now that are kind of the same theme. So I think testing them out, different themes now, and seeing what really works. So I like it. I'm all for a good test when it comes to, social media stuff.
Excellent. Well, speaking of testing, we are testing out our very first My Real Estate Show live stream. I am Sandi Lyn Burnett. I'm CEO of my real estate company. I started a brokerage a year and a month ago and fast tracked that, growing it 7 states. We are fast tracking it nationwide. Met Josh along the way. He is my co-host, and he is director of advancement in our South Dakota broker. And I'll let Josh introduce himself. Go ahead, Josh.
So I'm Josh. I've been with the company now. I think we're going on close to 6 months. I don't really know. It's been such a blur.
Wow.
But yeah, I'm the director of advancement, the managing broker for the state of South Dakota. And I'm super excited to be here and do something a little different for the real estate industry, especially when it comes to a podcast. And we are looking forward to giving you guys something that's much different than what we've seen so far.
We've always kind of seen like podcasts with an agenda, like build my downline or a very specific niche in real estate, right? We want to keep it light. We want agents to be able to just relax and then stay on top of their game in the industry, but also like be entertained, the YouTube thumbnail tip, whatever. We've also got producer Brian in the house. I served with Brian in the Marines, and I'm really like fortunate to have Brian on staff, because it's like it made our it's so fun working with one of your best friends, you know what I mean? But he's so quick to the draw. Like, it was a no-brainer to have producer Brian be the producer for the show, because he's so quick to the draw. When we were doing real estate trainings, when we were doing anything, we'd start talking about a subject and he would start throwing GIFs into the chat, and just everybody would start cracking up. Or I don't know how he locates this shit so fast, but I'm like, this is radio show producer material.
He is scary fast when it comes to throwing stuff up.
And it's funny that Brian says, 20 plus years ago, because I still have this thing in my head where I'm like still 25. I don't know. I'm like, I'm still 25. What are you guys talking about? And not like in a vain way, just I never thought aging would happen to me personally. So let's talk a little bit about real estate stuff. Josh had a certain subject that we thought might be good to just kind of open up and talk about. Like, we're going to talk about current events and different things going on in the industry, but also we're going to talk about our personal experiences and things that we experience. One reason that we wanted to do My Real Estate Show is because we're kind of trailblazers in the industry, and it's a tough road. It's a lot. I'll be honest. This is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. we're gonna have guests. We're gonna have guests on our show, and one of the guests that we're gonna have on is CEO of a competing brokerage, and I'm gonna admit to him because before I started this brokerage, he was like, "Don't do it. It's really it's a hard road." And the first thing I'm gonna admit to him is like, "Wow, you were right. This is really hard. I wouldn't trade it for the world because I believe in what we're building, but man." To be a trailblazer and to truly commit to the different things that you're doing and the different people in the industry that try to put their boot on your neck, it is not for the faint of heart.
Business is not for the faint of heart, period, I think.
Entrepreneurship, it's all about like doing the things you don't want to do when you don't want to do them.
Yeah.
So Josh, you kind of wanted to talk about a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think, we all know in this industry, post settlement has really changed the game when it comes to real estate and how agents are running their businesses. And one thing that we've seen is a huge changing of kind of who controls everything and a shifting. And everybody likes to talk a lot about NAR and their role in all of this. But we've recently had an experience at our brokerage. For those of you that don't know, we actually have kind of two brokerages. We have a non-NAR and an NAR side of our company. And it's two standalone companies. They're not the same. They're totally separate. But we do have both companies. So our thought process as a brokerage is that we want to give agents the option. We want them to have the choice to build their business how they want, and they shouldn't be under NAR's thumb or associations or all those type of things. If you're an agent, you should build your business the way that works for you. And if that's NAR, great. If that's being a non-NAR real estate agent, that's great as well. And we want to facilitate giving people options. And one thing that's come up recently is we had a association, and before I get into that, one thing I think most people need to understand is depending on where you are in the country, the way the associations and MLSs work are a little bit different. But this happened in Iowa, where we have you join an association that's separate from the MLS, and then you join the MLS separately. So two separate entities. And we had an association that basically came out and told us we were doing things wrong and took all of our agents, regardless of if they were NAR or non-NAR, out of the association and kicked everybody out. There was no reason given on why. There was no, you violated this bylaw for the association. There was none of that. It was basically just them saying, hey, because we think that the CEO is also running a non-NAR brokerage because she wrote a LinkedIn article about it 6 months ago, that we're just going to kick all your agents out. And the interesting thing to me, and I think where we want to take this today, is just talking about how much power some of these associations and NAR, which is stepping back, but how much power do they have really over your real estate agents and over our careers to build businesses the way we want? And it's interesting because I think this is a topic that's going to come up a lot more. So, Sandi, what are your thoughts? You have a little different perspective on this one because you're the CEO dealing with all this. I'm just kind of in the background looking at it. But yeah, what did I not talk about? Because I'm sure I missed a couple things there.
Well, not only am I CEO of this brokerage, but it hit close to home because it was a personal attack. I personally left NAR in December of 2025 because it no longer served my personal business needs, which was the trailblazing path that I wanted to pave for agents. I am not anti-NAR, okay? I am pro agent choice. When I first got my real estate license, I basically thought, that meant you became a realtor. Like, I hate that when people don't know realtor. Anyway, I feel like that should be like, you have to fucking pronounce it right in order to like have the title, but they don't care.
I'm screwed.
Yeah. Do you? Do you say it wrong?
Sometimes I do. Like if I'm talking fast and I don't think about it, I'll say it wrong. So which we can talk about that later. But the interesting thing about that is years ago, NAR paid millions of dollars for a campaign on how to pronounce the word. And what I find funny about that is like, of all the things going on in the real estate industry, that's where we're spending money is on pronunciations. Like I'm all for that if we fix everything else first, but I'm not the one to say it because I'll probably butcher it on our live stream.
That's hilarious. No, so I gave up my realtor title. I am a real estate agent and CEO of a brokerage, but what was interesting was there was no due process. There was no, just like Josh said, they did not even cite one single rule that we broke. It was, please reference this LinkedIn article that a non-NAR member wrote, and never mind the 10 years of dues that I paid into that particular association, and never mind all of the volunteering that I did and all the events that I showed up to and the relationships that I built. It was just like a total middle finger. It was almost like they wanted to punish me personally for leaving by hurting the rest of the agents. And just so you guys know how this works, our managing broker, our state managing broker, that was her primary association. So in this world, you have a primary association if you belong to multiple. You have a primary association as a broker, and then you can be members of several associations. Well, because this was her primary association and they dropped her without due process, that automatically sends out a message essentially to all of our agents in the state of, like, not our agents, excuse me, all of the other associations in the state of Iowa, because our broker was no longer a member of an association. The primary membership had dropped her. So therefore, all of our Iowa agents across the entire state had no membership in their association because our broker, like by NAR's rules, had no membership because she had no primary membership. They knew what they were doing. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly how many businesses they were messing with. In the state of Iowa, it's very easy to see how many licenses are associated with our brokerage. And to me, that's disgusting. As you know, the whole National Association of Realtors was set up to protect consumers and to set forth a path of ethics, like to hold agents accountable and then to protect consumers. And I don't understand how completely like cutting off a bunch of listings these agents did nothing wrong. And all of a sudden their clients' listings are just canceled like in the middle of, and they knew what they were doing by doing this at the end of the business day too. I mean, it was just so disgusting and shady.
Yeah.
Like,
well, yeah.
What better way to convince you to be a member of NAR than to pull some shit like that on a whole bunch of members of NAR?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, and we've talked about this, is I think we're going to start seeing this all over the country a lot more often. And what I'm seeing and I'm observing locally in my market is there's a lot of these associations and MLSs that are losing members. They're losing a lot of control. And let's face it, they're losing a lot of money because as people are leaving these associations because they don't need them anymore. And part of it is because they weren't providing any value. And I think that's really where NAR and then a lot of these associations went wrong is they were collecting dues, but they weren't really providing agents really any value. And so now that agents are like, wait, I have options, I have choices, I think there's a lot of these associations that are going to just go away because they can't compete because they don't provide value. And then I think we're going to see a lot in the country all over. I think we're going to see a lot of situations like this where we have associations or MLSs that way overstep because they're trying to like secure, everything. And I really believe this whole thing is them trying to secure control and use an example out of our brokerage of, hey, if you step out of line, we're just going to kick you out. What's that going to do to your business? And, that's, I think, part of the problem with this whole system. There's so many third party companies now that are involved with this real estate process with NAR and the whole trickle down effect that the consumers are really the ones getting screwed by this. And that was the thing to me that was completely unacceptable is we had agents with active listings that without any warning, no emails, no nothing, they lost listings or they got taken down. They didn't lose them, but they got taken down off the MLS, which let's face it, like that's money out of their clients' pockets. That's money out of their pocket because they're coming off the market. It was brokerage. It was the brokerage's money because then we had to scramble last minute to get into a new association and get these listings uploaded again. So we're not violating our fiduciary duty to our clients. And it's all because you have a CEO of an association that didn't like a LinkedIn article. Like,
it
no.
was all for ego,
Yeah. Well, and I also think the interesting thing about it too is, Sandi Lyn, you made a great video a couple days after the fact, which I thought was funny because you were like, I actually made it right before, but then I let it sit because I didn't want to, but the interesting thing about it is I thought the video was great because it was super authentic. It was not done like in a finger pointing manner. It was just like, hey, this is what's going on. But the real interesting thing about it was the reception that it got. Because agents were like, wait a second, what? There were a lot of agents that didn't understand what was going on. And then there's also a lot of agents that understand what's going on, like, see, this is the problem. And, I think part of it is as, real estate industry, we're so divided, like in different markets. But when we start talking to agents in other markets and they're like, no, this is a problem everywhere, I think we're going to start having this conversation a lot more. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's changing the industry for the better. My belief is if you give agents the ability to build a more efficient business and compete, that ultimately the consumer is the one that's going to, be the one that benefits from that down the road. So I think it's a good thing, but I think we're going to have a ton of growing pains. And I think a lot of it comes back to there's a lot of these third-party entities that have just basically been scraping money off the top for no reason. Let's face it, especially some of these associations. If you don't have an MLS, what exactly is it that you do? Provide some continuing education credits every year, but really, you're taking a couple $100 a month from these agents and you're not giving them anything. It's a really hard, it's a really easy sell for an agent to see you later. But it's really hard for you as an association then to survive. And so, I think we're going to see a big thinning of the herd.
Well, I want to comment on a couple of things, but I don't want to forget to talk about the ads that we ran and the response to them because the agents are seeing the hurt, right? The response was wild on the ads that we ran. But what I want to comment on was when this happened, when the association chose to do that, and then all these agents were dropped, it really showed, how these agents chose to handle this, because I felt really bad. It was like not their fight. They didn't choose this. They chose to be NAR members. They chose to be members of an association. They were abiding by the rules to no fault of their own. And I mean, certainly to no fault of mine. We have been doing everything we've been playing by their own rules. But, still it happened. And things like this are going to happen. But I found it very interesting how it kind of separated the agents into categories on how they handled it. What kind of agent are you going to be? So one of them chose to get pissed and was like, I'm never going back to that association. I'm going to join this one. And another association welcomed us with open arms. They're like, we think that's wrong what they did. You know, we see your vision, we align with your vision, and we welcome you. And I can't thank them enough. Shout out to Hometown Association of Realtors. I can't say enough good things about them. Anyway, and one person chose to step up and get their broker's license. It motivated him. I thought that was amazing. But then another agent left. They were like, hey, nothing personal. I think what you're doing is great. I can't afford to be shut off again. Like, I can't have that happen. And I completely respected and understood that. But it was like such different, stark different reactions. And yeah, but that was, I mean, clearly that was the result that they wanted to have happen. They wanted to like put me out of business. But yeah, I was happy that for the most part, it motivated these agents. And they were like, you know what? Clearly you're on to something, because you ruffled so many feathers that this is happening. So I loved how that was really the true reception.
Yeah. Well, and I thought the other really cool thing about it is we found an association within a couple hours of this all happening, because we were in scramble mode. You know, it was funny. I made the joke when we were going through this. We were all in like the situation room when this all went down, because, you know, it took basically all of our entire agents in Iowa offline. And as a brokerage, and the people in the leadership with this brokerage were like, that's not okay. So we were scrambling. But what was really cool, and I think this is the takeaway too for some of these associations, is we found an association right away that welcomed us with open arms and said, hey, we'll take your monthly dues, no problem. Yeah. We don't have an issue with what you're doing. And that's the funny thing to me, that I think where this whole thing is crumbling. I think a couple years ago, NAR had such a stranglehold on these association MLSs that we would have had a really hard time finding an association that was willing to do that, because they wouldn't want to fight with NAR. The interesting thing is now we get kicked out of one. Within a couple hours, we found another one that's like, we don't have a problem with it. So now the MLS or the association that kicked us out, it's like, you guys have some competition. So, hey, Sandi Lyn, I got to pause this for a second. I'm getting a phone call from a doctor.
All right. Sounds good. You know what? I think this is actually a great time to close it out. And, Brian, this is good to lose the stream, or I mean, end the stream, but it was a nice